James, can you hear me? James. Good morning, James.
Test.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know it's not typical that we get together on a Tuesday morning, but a lot going on. And I appreciate all of our council members and staff making the time to get together and sort this out. Go ahead and call this meeting to order. Note for the record that all members of City Council are present and accounted for. Do we have a flag, James? Okay. Say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So for those who may be joining us online, this is a workshop, so there will be no formal votes taken or no business decisions made here today. Council members and I, over the last year and a half, 2 years, have been working together to try to set the priorities for the city as far as capital improvements. There's been a lot of moving parts over the last 2 years. Some of it was moving parts with the financial status, with the tax digest and things that were going on with assessments through the county and the tax assessor. And then this year, of course, as we thought we were getting a handle on the adjusted tax digest, COVID hit. And so there's been a lot of turmoil as far as financial projections over the last 2 years. And also over the last year or so, many of the projects that involved other entities, such as the Georgia Department of Transportation in cooperation with other governments, whether they were local municipalities near us or Forsyth County. Some of the projects that had a lot of moving parts have finally become a little more clear. We have a little clarity on the costs involved in those projects. We have timelines that have become much more clear to us over the last 2 years. And so it's only natural that now, as we seem to have about as much clarity as we're going to get on the fiscal picture for the time being, and as well as the timelines for many of the major projects that are already in planning and ongoing, for us to sit down together as a group and try to determine what the priorities are within the projects that we've already discussed or have been brought to our attention over the last few years. So that's what this is all about. I appreciate the efforts that our staff have made to put together as much information and data around project timelines and projected costs, given the fact that there are a lot of uncertainties, especially projecting costs for projects that really have no set design. We haven't done surveys to see how much right-of-way would be done. So even though that we do have numbers here, staff has gone to a great extent and a tremendous amount of time and effort to try to put together the best numbers and the best information they could to help us make an informed decision. And as well, our council members, as you may recall, a few weeks or a few months ago, I guess now, I asked everyone to put together their personal priorities, and we really didn't set a criteria for that. So we began with just personal opinions based on the priorities of each individual council member. Staff took those numbers, compiled them. We ranked them on a 1 to 3 scale, and we just to give us a starting point. You know, that was just something for us to sit down and look at together. So that's where this ranking form comes from. If you see the numbers on the far right, that's just an average of the initial rankings by each individual council member compiled together and averaged out. Based on that rough draft, preliminary draft, the staff then sat down with myself, Councilwoman Richard, and Councilman Binder to help flesh that out a little better, to discuss what that looked like, get preliminary questions from the three of us that would help them come to some better format to provide to the entire council. And now we have this document in front of us, which is basically the summary of all that process, which is literally almost years of work by staff and months of work by our council working together with them. So this is where we are. The hope is that we'll come out of this work session now, and this is just, like I said, a workshop to give feedback, have discussions amongst ourselves about why we rank things certain ways, and hopefully come out of this session with a better clarity of the group's priorities, not just individual priorities averaged out. And then that will give us the opportunity to better understand each other's priorities, hopefully give some clarity to staff and ourselves, and give us the discussion points we need over the next 4 to 6 weeks as we have discussions in broken down sessions and individual conversations and things like that, leading into our retreat, which we are scheduling for January. That will allow us to set priorities as far as capital expenditures for the mid-year budget, as well as begin having conversations about funding sources and opportunities and all of our options to move forward on as many of these capital projects as we can. So that's kind of an introduction and explanation of why we're here at this time. And at this point, I'll turn this over to staff so they can kind of explain a little more of what we're looking at here in the project list. Pete?
So this is the spreadsheet that Finance and Public Works have worked together, and if I need to zoom in, let me know if I can zoom in. Basically, it is the same sheet you have in front of you. The green is the ones for each project, so that was considered the highest priority, and that's how you got the average score. As the mayor said, the costs are basically, some of them are more than a WAG. Some of them you'll notice have the word allocation next to it. For example, the North Point Parkway corridor, $25 million allocation. We have a couple parameters that we were using towards the criteria for the timeline. Can this project start in that window, in the 0 to 3 year time frame? Can I start construction then? Or is there a project like the Georgia Foreign Express lanes or the State Route 9, or there's an adjacent project to the project that we're looking at doing? Somebody else is controlling the timeline. We do not control Georgia 400 when it starts, when it ends, either State Route 9, as well as the other wild card is right away. Depending on what type of project we're looking at, for example, the North Point Corridor project, that is broken up into multiple categories of $5 million, $5 million, $15 million, primarily because we do not know, A, when we're actually going to start the project with the design. We have a tentative time frame, but we have not been formally proceeding with that. We don't have a consultant, as well as the right-of-way acquisition for a federally funded project takes approximately 2+ years. Tentatively speaking, we're looking at over 50 parcels potentially need right-of-way or an easement along North Point Parkway, so it takes that much longer to get the appraisals and everything else. So there was only one set of projects. That doesn't mean they're not important, but Haynesbridge Road widening and then the roundabout at Roswell, Old Roswell were the only two projects that at this time have a score of 3. Straight across the board. Some are very close, but this was our first stab, and working with Tom and Sean, Public Works, try to figure out what could we move forward a little bit with. Cumming Street's another good example. That one down there, the Cumming Street streetscape. We've got some phasing going on. The $8 million, it's a WAG. That is a flat out WAG of all WAGs. Basically, we do not know the final scope. We do not know the right-of-way concerns. We also got Georgia 400 with the
So just for clarity's sake on a WAG, that's a wild assuming guess, right?
You got it.
Okay.
Where swag is the scientific. So we have 2 projects on either end of Cumming Street. We've got the trade winds ripple effect study that we're looking at. that along West Side Parkway that may have an impact to Cummings Street at West Side, as well as we have State Route 9 at Cummings Street that could impact the project. Not saying we can't phase things through when we go through it, but we haven't had a formal vetting of that project, formal design, in fact, even a conceptual discussion, which we are working towards for the council retreat in January. So with that, I mean, if there's concerns of, looking at this list and going, I'm shocked this project isn't moved higher or lower. Dan?
Is the Tier 3 Davis Drive extension, isn't that tied to the CID?
That currently is a funded CID project. There are some revisions that we're going through with the CID right now. Trying to.
Funded here.
It does, well, I want to say it kills the deal. Their cost estimate is based off of their plans that they have. There is some right-of-way constraints they're working through right now. I'm not going to say it kills it because current cost estimate, they have the funds based off their current cost estimate. They have the funding within their account, within the CID's account.
We did not commit to any dollars.
We have not committed, no. It's been in our CIP for the last several years. Doesn't mean that it's needs to move forward from a city's perspective, but Public Works looks at. So.
Sure, Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pete, with along the lines of Councilmember Merkel's question on the Davis Drive with funding sources, what other projects associated here have potential partnership dollars, be it the Georgia Department of Transportation or the CID?
So the CID does not have any other projects tied to this list.
Okay.
They themselves are going through a priority list of projects. In fact, they'll probably have a workshop with their board in February. And then come March, they'll be able to come out of there with a priority list. The only project on this list, going off of memory right now, pretty much is the North Point Parkway corridor is the only project that is tied to federal funding.
Follow-up question to that. If, for example, I know within a certain amount of feet of a GDOT road, I learned this a couple weeks ago with your question, with the question around the North Point, where they take over jurisdiction or have input and influence. Do they have input and influence on being with Hopewell and Vaughn Drive being within so many feet of, in Mayfield and Canton too, for that matter? Do they have the ability to participate? Are those close enough? Do they have interest in those projects? I'm certain we've never asked.
So they do not have jurisdictional authority over those two intersections. If the city of Alpharetta pursues funding from GDOT, then yes, they do have we have to follow their standards, their policies, and their procedures depending on what type of funding we receive. So House Bill 170 has funding, which is a little bit more of the state aid, where it doesn't have the formal federal process compared to our Old Mill Parkway T-Splosh project, where we see federal aid and we're following the PDP plan development process with GDOT. So it's a 4+ year design.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions at this point?
And there are exhibits to all these as well, if you guys need the exhibits to help figure some things out.
Okay, thank you, Pete.
Yep.
So just in general, and the blueprint isn't really set in stone for this discussion, but I think one of the ways that would be helpful to begin is for us as individual council members to point out perhaps projects on here that aren't in tier 1. If you have priorities that you would like to see perhaps moved up into tier 1, because I think most of all, it's going to be critical for us to set those top priorities as a group. So if anyone on council has any concerns about something that may be in tier 2 or tier 3 that they would like to discuss amongst the rest of us as far as the priority, or vice versa. If you see something in tier 1 that you would like to consider dropping down into a lower priority, then that's a good place for us to start. Councilman Hydes.
I think I have an understanding of what is entailed by the trade winds ripple effect. But Pete, if, for my sake, if you would explain what the scope of that description entails. We may all have the same understanding. I don't know. So.
While that's being loaded, what I'm looking for is the map of the illustration that had the study area, which is West Side Parkway to the, there we go. It all comes up. West Side Parkway to the west, Windward Parkway to the north, I'm sorry, and Webbridge Road to the south, and then North Point Parkway to the east. And what we were doing was our consultant is studying that area for different intersection improvements. North Point Parkway is going to have, here we go. North Point Parkway is going to have additional signals. One here, these two brand new signals are not part of the corridor right now. These signals will, per the preliminary study, will delay traffic between Webbridge Road to Windward Parkway. So we've asked our consultant, wherever where you see a star, is to analyze that intersection for an improvement to improve traffic flow.
What's an optimistic and pessimistic date of completion for trade winds?
So I should have, right now they've got the data. They're analyzing different intersection improvements, and I should have preliminary recommendations by the council retreat.
Right now, we don't know or we don't have a WAG.
No, we don't have a WAG related to cost or related to which improvements we would recommend.
I'm actually asking when DOT will complete the trade wind bridge.
Oh.
Traffic will start flowing on.
There is no, the formal date for construction is 2022 is the start date, and the completion date is 2026. That's the best I got.
And it's safe to say that it probably wouldn't happen in the first 2 years of that stretch, correct?
I would imagine so. I would believe so.
Doesn't seem like it makes sense to open up that bridge if you haven't already gotten the toll lanes all the way up to it.
Correct. And we've asked Georgia Department of Transportation, when they close Webbridge Road, bridge over Georgia 400, if they could have trade winds open as a relief valve. They were not permitted. They would not commit to that. It'd be open for more discussion, dialogue when the design, build, maintain vendor is selected.
Right. But, and I appreciate that clarity, but my point being that traffic won't really change as far as toll traffic entering there or exiting there until the toll lanes are completed.
Correct.
Okay. So I think it's safe to assume that it won't be functionally adding additional 400 traffic until near the end of that 2026 timeframe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to try to get that
Yeah.
clarity.
I will know more when they get the proposals in and the schedules and everything.
Councilman Binder.
To just quickly on that one, with them closing down Webbridge, that be an influx of traffic during that close down period on North Point, between Windward and Old Milton.
One more time.
When they close down Webbridge to retrofit that bridge, will there be an increase of traffic on North Point during that time between Old Milton and?
One would presume yes. However, given the technology that we have in our hands and people following whatever ways or whatever map system they choose tells them to go, that could defer that to a different corridor. For example, we hope in Old Mill Parkway is moving along at some duration during that to a 6-lane road. We won't be finished by then, but there'll be work going on.
I guess, because we had it, talking for 0 to 3 and 4 to 5, splitting up trade winds. So maybe getting the North Point portion fixed sooner, before the bridge goes down may make sense. And to the mayor's point,
Correct.
leave north winds alone until traffic becomes affected.
Yeah, I mean, what we're looking at right now with the consultant is, and we asked GDOT for this, as part of their initial study, was for a roundabout at these two stars right here to keep traffic going. Those costs were coming around $1.5 to $2 million per roundabout. The traffic signal was less, so they're going forward with the lower cost. That is something that could take place, as well as we're really studying what needs to happen with the existing traffic signal here at Morris Road related to the whole project. So there are things that we can take place before before Georgia 400 Express Lanes opens up that could still improve the traffic before it even opens. Yeah. I mean, another one to look at that we know that's coming up is this right here, a right turn lane on Morris, but we'll have a list of priorities or a list of recommendations with dollars and priorities, hopefully by the retreat.
Councilman Hypes, then I have Councilman Burnett and Councilwoman Richard. Please, any council member, just make sure you catch my attention. I'm trying to keep up with order.
So I really appreciated the input on the interrelationship between DOT completing around 2026 and that particular bridge and project. Are there other projects where we're looking at DOT's construction work? Let's say, for example, is Lily Garden and the Highway 9 project, are they in any way related? For anything that's related to what the DOT is doing, which is not within our control, do we have a completion date that might impact our schedule?
Yes, Highway 9 does have a completion. Lily Garden, for example, is tied directly to State Route 9. It is within the limits of construction of the State Route 9 project.
When do you think DOT will be done?
So I believe go off of memory here. State Route 9 will start next year and be completed between 2024 and 2025. So the challenge with State Route 9 is with a lot of our projects these days is utilities. And that will control if we get pushed back or not to 2025.
Where you have the footnotes, those are the ones that fall from the.
Correct.
Was that all your questions, Councilman Hypes? Then Councilman Burnett.
Pete, would you put the map you just had back up with respect to West Side Parkway and a turn signal? I think it's well documented that there are some very high speed people that drive up and down West Side Parkway that are somewhat of a problem to our Department of Public Safety. I do think that I don't know about a roundabout in both of those places where you have your purple line, but I do think that if you did it on West Side Parkway, if nothing else to deter, to me, it's a safety issue that a light may or may not take care of. I also realize that everything costs money and it may not be on the list, but if you could deter people who wanted to go 150 or 160 miles an hour from wanting to do that, that's a great way to think about going about it. Thank you.
Any comments, Pete?
West Side Parkway is an alternate to Georgia 400. That's why it was constructed. And the more traffic signals you have on a arterial like West Side Parkway, the more challenging it is for us to keep traffic flowing. Because all it takes is one vehicle to trigger a turning movement that then will keep the change the light cycle.
But as it regards Councilman Burnett's question, if we were trying to slow down that thoroughfare in that area, a roundabout would be
It would.
just as adequate as a red light with better traffic flow?
The traffic signal will not decrease the speed in that area. In fact, you will see an increase of speed, especially when you see that wonderful yellow light come about. And then, yeah, allegedly. Yeah. So to control speed, the roundabout will be much more effective than a traffic signal.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Richard?
Thank you. Pete, the allocation that you have for the trade winds is a total of 10 million, right? You've got 5 and 5 broken out. Are we expecting financial support from either CID and GDOT on this particular?
No,
Or
ma'am.
this is all on the city?
As of now, it's all in the city. Yes, ma'am.
Are we going to be pursuing assistance in regards to funding?
I think it depends on what type of project we're looking at and where it's located. I don't believe everything within the map of this area is all within CID.
Right, you're correct,
So
right?
a portion, that doesn't mean that we can't approach them. It doesn't mean we can't work with them. But there are areas where we would have more of a challenge. Typically, the CID can assist with design
Mhm.
outside of their limits or adjacent to their limits, but not construction funding.
And then from GDOT's perspective?
No.
No?
We have not, we could pursue it, that we could pursue anything. However, then you start getting into the time frame again. So they're most likely are going to go through the federal funding match like Old Mill Parkway was and not use House Bill 170 because those are for more quicker projects and more maintenance associated. So we can pursue. There's no problem with that at all.
Thank you.
Councilman Binder and then Councilman Burnett.
First one, just a question on the, where'd it go? The school on Cumming Street, where's that? The crosswalk,
Yes.
which item is that? Is that just because we don't know what the bigger plan overall is for Cumming Street as far as streetscape and all that?
Yes.
Is there any way to get a crosswalk that installed there that would fall in line with what we would think of the realm of possibility?
Let's see here.
And I say that just to mean that especially with the schools, pedestrian safety and having crosswalks there, I almost don't mind painting the crosswalk twice, once now and once after the streetscape, but there's a way to have it so that we feel comfortable with what we're building now as a crosswalk would fit into what we're building on a streetscape. I would like to do it. I know plenty of people walk there. I was trying to find it. I was still lost. I know it's on tier 2. It's the,
Streetscape, right. I
So-
think, isn't that Manning Oaks?
Manning
So-
Oaks is the one I'm looking for. Yep.
Yep, so that's up actually on tier 1. It's the fourth one down, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. It just doesn't have the Cumming Street
Oh, the 6,
association.
it's because it was 6 years out instead of, my question is, can we get it closer to 0 to 3? Thanks, Councilmember Richard. Yeah, I got lost.
Okay. So are we all clear on what we're talking about there? So the crosswalk for Cumming Street, Manning Oaks School is a tier 1, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
But it's 6 years out. Is there any way to get it closer to 0 to 3?
Yes. It's got to be funded. I mean, we could easily push it towards it. I mean, a lot of these, that is one where we wanted to push it out because we wanted to see what was going to happen with the Cumming Street corridor before we would recommend funding for the project. So it's very possible that whatever you put in would have to be removed as part of the Cumming Street corridor project.
In what we're, sorry.
You go ahead. I'll defer some of my time, but I got another question afterward, but.
So
not-
for
not
example, what
related.
would have to get removed would be the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. That would be part of it. It also could be in a location where at the end game is not where we really want it to be. 'Cause-
Just personally speaking, I'm okay with investing $100,000 for safety for the school kids. Cause I think that school uses quite a bit of people walking to and from that school.
It's,
And then
so
having to redo it or redo part of it later on,
I
5
will-
years later.
I will throw it out here right now. The mid-block crosswalk isn't for the school. It is for this building right here on Sundays, on the weekends, that utilizes the school's parking lot that crosses the street.
It's heavily used at multiple times, and especially at night, with a lot of pedestrians going to the MU Center.
I may be wrong about who uses it and when uses it. I just know that's a heavy pedestrian street and
It is a heavy pedestrian
and there's
street.
not, yeah.
What we discovered when we went out here and we did an analysis and looking at everything, it's not heavily crossed during school hours.
Okay. And that's
So I didn't
fine
want
too. And
people to think that it's strictly for the schools and not that crossing is not important on other days. However, it wasn't solely dedicated towards
yeah.
elementary school.
And just to clarify, Pete, so there is a red light there right now, right? So
Correct.
there's a pedestrian crossing at the red light,
Correct.
correct? Okay.
But currently, they're not just crossing at the red light, they're crossing further down the police escort, and it's currently not well lit.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to see at night.
Okay. Any others about this particular intersection while we're at it? Okay.
The on Webbridge road improvements. I know is that tier. What tier is that for T-Splosh?
All right, so Webbridge Road from, I keep losing my connection, I'm sorry.
And because I know it's listed a couple times, item number 1 on tier 2 is what I'm speaking of.
So for Webbridge Road between the Greenway and city limits going east has been allocated towards T-Splosh funding.
Which tier?
The current tier, what we're in right now, 1, I guess.
1. Okay.
So the funding we have today in T-Splosh 1 is going towards the construction of Webbridge Road from the Greenway to Webbridge Park. In here, that $10 million is the allocation from Morris Road to the Greenway. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And we're going through design value engineering right now regarding the bridge replacement project. Yes, a good portion of it is, yes. And the current cost estimate reflects only maintaining the 2-foot beauty strip, the 5-foot wide sidewalk between Morris and North Point Parkway. We will have a design to accommodate a wider sidewalk and a wider beauty strip, but the cost estimate is not reflective of that.
And we currently have funding in the current T-Splosh for, say, the roundabout on
Webbridge Way,
Webbridge Way.
correct,
Okay.
yes.
Just to refresh my memory, Morris Road to the Greenway includes the bridge?
Correct,
Okay. So that's the large cost there is the replacement of that bridge.
yes.
And then Shirley Bridge Road and Park Creek, is that staying the same as a light or what's going on
Signal,
there?
correct,
currently?
yes, yes.
Okay.
There will be no, yes, there was not a return on investment worth going to replacing the signal with a roundabout.
Okay. All right, that's all I got.
I believe Councilman Burnett was next.
Just, I hate to change the subject or go back, but do you have a list outside of these tier 3 projects that are important to the Georgia Department of Transportation that they would like to see us participate in? And I only ask that question in an effort to see if there are things we can horse trade off of this list in there, because we're as good at as any municipality in the state of making sure the juice is worth the squeeze with GDOT. And we have lots of things they want. I just wanted to see if you knew of anything that we could go down there and try to beg, borrow, and steal.
So the way Georgia Department of Transportation looks at a lot of things is how does an improvement assist their road? So for example, you take Old Mill Parkway, 6 lane, we're able to get 6 lanes out of it. They know they need it. It's under that capacity. It's beyond capacity. The our Killenbridge Road project help assisted in that. We already had it funded through our bond referendum though. Haynesbridge Road would somewhat fall into that category too a little bit. If we could see that there was a movement of people on Haynesbridge Road, instead of going up Georgia 400, would take Haynesbridge Road and would then hit Old Alabama and bypass. So a 4-lane that would benefit them. So we're blessed that we only have State Route 9, State Route 120 through our city. So anything that would improve traffic flow adjacent to or through those areas at those intersections, they would be looking at to assist us. So given your list, to answer your question specifically, of that list, the only one that really would probably potentially be North Point Parkway. And that is because it's parallel to Georgia 400. However, we already got funding from
Well, we do. My question was more selfishly for our list of other projects to say, if we throw in here, would you do these on a 2 or a 3 for 1, where it moves up their priority list, or that they're willing to listen? Because they definitely have shown a willingness to be
partner.
good to us.
Yes. Yeah. What we could look at doing is like you look at any improvement perpendicular to that corridor, they would look at too. So if we wanted to do something along Milton Avenue that would assist keeping traffic flowing on Main Street, that would be a benefit to them. You take the intersection of Hopewell at Vaughn, that could help them out because it keeps traffic flowing. That gets some of the traffic off of 9 and onto Hopewell.
Just worth the thought. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And we use that same thing for McGinnis, by the way. That's how we
Pete, I don't think you have to go back to the project, but when we were talking about the North Point corridor and the trade winds impact, one of the items that you had pointed out was the red light there where the MARTA Park and Ride crosses over to AT&T. Is the timing of that red light tied to anything else, or could we wait until that mixed-use development there comes forward before we make that investment?
So you're talking about the existing red light, or are you talking about the one at
The
Lighthouse?
one proposed, I
Proposed
can't,
at Lighthouse? I think it's called Lighthouse, that street. Yeah.
I'll take your word for it. But yeah, where the undeveloped mixed-use development crosses over into the AT&T parking
Yes.
lot. Is that something that has to be done immediately, or does that lend itself
It
to
is
being
tied-
waiting?
Yeah, from what I understand, it's tied to a zoning condition
Okay, of the mixed-use
of the
development.
mixed-use development. We, as in Public Works, will not turn that signal on until the warrants are met for that mixed use.
So there's no sense in building it if we're not going to turn it on.
It will all depend on when the development comes through.
Okay,
So we wouldn't turn it on just because there's 50 homes there.
right. But in this discussion, I'm more concerned about when we make the capital investment. So if I understand you right, you're saying there's really no need for us to make that capital investment in that red light until the development is coming forward, at which point we should have impact fees that might allow us to pay for that, right?
I would imagine so.
Okay.
Is it, Kathy might know better, is that development, have they submitted, are they?
No, all they have is portion of it.
Okay.
It's under construction and single family. So, you all.
Okay. So in the big scheme of things, that would be a lower priority for the trade winds corridor.
Yes, unless something would, all of a sudden you see the development coming through. and
Right.
Trigger. it.
Okay. Councilman Burnett? No, I just had that one question. That was a question that had come up to me earlier, and then we moved over to another area. I just wanted to clarify it before I forgot.
One of the questions I have, and not so much for Pete as the remainder of council, is that I know one of the fears we have as a city with our new parking deck is that people at the school are going to use it, and they have all the parking that they are supposed to need at the school. And so it was very highly ranked for in tier 1 for improved crossing from parking deck on to the north side of Milton Avenue. And it was, everybody ranked it 1 except Donald and I. And I didn't, if you wanted to discourage students from using that deck and hogging the parking for the merchants in the business community, I didn't understand the logic of creating something that makes it easy to go from the parking deck to the school. And I don't know that I'm right. Sometimes when you see 5 people rank it at number 1 and you don't understand why, it's a you problem. So I wanted to kind of open that up with y'all because I don't understand.
Did you have a question, or would you want to?
I was going to
respond?
address that because I think I was on the early discussions with this.
Yeah, please did. I just wanted to
It
clarify because
wasn't-
both of you.
It wasn't designed for the school. It was designed for the merchants and the tenants of that building. In addition to the space they were going to take out anyways because it's a blind turn. So
Where's the blind turn?
at the top where you see the green and the red? Right now, there's 2 parking spaces. If you're coming out from the top of that picture to turn left or right, it's very hard to see traffic that's going west, I guess, or north. So I know what you're saying. Honestly, that's not going to be the issue when it comes to school. And I think we're kind of in a hurry up and wait mode because we don't know exactly what impact it'll have, other than I have talked to Randy multiple times and he said, once construction's finished, that's who's occupying the first 2 floors on that parking deck anyway. So those guys will vacate as construction finishes, opening those up. And then we got 5 floors to see how it plays out. And then we talked about, whether we do timed parking on the first couple of floors, just so the merchants get the advantage of that. We've got an agreement with Dr. Hines still that we have to have a certain number of spaces for him. So if they do get in there, and they will, and some of their dads are going to lawyer up public parking. We've had those discussions. Kathy's well aware of it. So I really think it's kind of a hurry up and wait at this point. I don't think there's anything we can throw money at right now to deter or stop what we don't know is coming. Make sense?
Councilman Heights?
Yeah, I've talked with a lot of those folks across the street, and it's not just those that front there in that overhead photos, the ones going around to Fermented and on down the street for their limited street side parking. And 2 other things, in addition, the hotel's going to come online, and it's not just hotel guests, but there's going to be 2 restaurants and a speakeasy, and so getting from that side of the street to the other side of the street and discouraging, or actually facilitating people crossing where they're jaywalking anyway to get them there safely, I think is sort of important. And then the last thing is, when school starts, because people cross there anyway, there's going to be a lot heavier traffic pattern through there. Early in the mornings, I wouldn't expect to see a whole lot of pedestrian traffic, but 2:30 in the afternoon, when the school's fully populated, it's going to be a lot of young drivers out and a lot of pedestrians interacting. So, anything we can do to get them safely from one side to the other, I think is pretty important.
Councilwoman Richard?
Those are all great points, and I'm totally, I was going to articulate that it's not necessarily just for the school that we were looking at that crosswalk. But Pete, didn't we make some adjustments to that blind corner recently? I just wanted to make sure that I understood that we did take some action on that.
Yes, we marked off the parking spaces right here with some, we call them turtles, some raised paint markers, so people can't park there.
So the corner currently is not to the degree that it was before. It's a safer intersection as far
yes.
as cars are concerned.
Yes, we have a much better site triangle to work with now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilman Binder.
Just, yeah, I mean, I use that parking because I'm coming in from the west side. I use that parking. I'm crossing the street probably 9 times out of 10. And so I think most people, it would be conducive. I think that whole area really needs to increase on pedestrian safety. And that's also why I'm a big fan of doing a scramble in there too, because that light, just a little bit east, a lot of people I see using using a crosswalk once to go east-west and then go north-south. So I think that I'm a fan of that crosswalk there, and then the scramble, it's either a tier 2 or tier 3.
No, that is more of a deterrent for the vehicles traveling eastbound to get into that left turn lane. Deterrent. So, okay, so given that this is a dual left turn lane in the middle, let's say right here, we know there's not going to be as much movement going into the parking deck as there is of those who want to turn left onto northbound Canton Street. So we do see individuals that will utilize the dual left lane way back from where school is coming out, and the kids and adults traveling a little faster than they should on Milton Avenue, and utilize that dual left turn lane to access the left turn lane to go north onto Canton Street. So we want the people to traverse along the dedicated lane and then weave over into the left turn lane. This project is the catalyst for slowing the vehicles down as you approach downtown. Without this here, you don't start the ripple effect of, because you will stop here when we have the reflection beacons. Where the scramble is looking at trying to be configured is we will remove this crosswalk right here to help keep things moving, and look at trying to get the scramble, go catty corner. But yeah, and then with Kathy's, I call it Kathy's Hotel, but with Kathy's team with the hotel design, there's another mid-block crosswalk occurring there. So you're starting to see more. Academy Street, Milton Avenue will turn into a mini parking lot.
Councilman Heights.
In terms of slowing the traffic down, we can expect to have speed zone cameras in front of the high school.
I do not know.
Is there any reason?
I do not know the answer to that.
But I mean, it would be an area that we would be authorized as a city to place the radar speed zone cameras. It's in a school zone, right?
It would be potentially available to us. That would, only because I remember having that conversation specifically with Director Robinson as we contemplated that program, because I thought in a heavily pedestrian area like this, it would be an added benefit to be able to slow
So
people
we might be able to
down.
move your ripple effect even further back. with some-
There's a little bit of and I think it's Captain Stewart and I talked about this location way back. Rust Haven, so the frontage on Rust Haven Cemetery is very minimal. So the ability of getting a camera the way they currently are designed that I've seen along Webbridge corridor could be problematic on that side. Not saying we can't figure it out, but they're rather large.
Is there a mausoleum we can put one on top of?
I'm sure we could figure something out that Donald will approve.
Councilman Binder?
Are those big file cabinets speed deterrents? Like when people see them, they stop, or do you just realize it was a speed trap once you get the ticket? 2 weeks
I
later?
have no way of answering that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I just I don't realize they're there until I pass them. So luckily I haven't gotten anything in the mail yet, but
I really don't, I don't know how effective they've been. I don't know how many tickets been. I know very little on the subject.
I don't think they are.
I think you burn your hand once on the stove, you learn that the stove's hot.
Do we have any other questions? Councilman Binder?
I think, I don't know if it's time for questions, but your original question to us was our thoughts on the tiers and that, and I'll just kick it there. I think the only thing is I'd move the Manning Oaks one. I'd like to see that sooner rather than later. Trade winds, I think there's some items, and we'll have a better idea after the retreat of maybe low-hanging fruit that can be done now, that would make sense now, maybe along North Point, but not, then say the second half of the dollars towards when it's closer to GDOT completing their project.
Because it is a workshop, we're not going to be voting on it, but to give us a better sense amongst ourselves. So in the discussion about Manning Oaks, does anyone else agree that it's a good idea to go ahead and move forward with that as a higher priority?
I personally
Mayor Pro
do.
Tem Mitchell.
I personally do, based on the pedestrian traffic that the Hindu Center brings to that area. It's a hazard, and because of the fact that there's an entrance that's away from, an entrance to the school that's away from the traffic light, we get a lot of crossings there that are currently police escorted crossings. And so it makes it even more difficult at night, and the fact that it's not well lit, I would consider that a greater priority.
Councilman Burnett?
No, I agree. And that's kind of Alpharetta's initial dense area. There's just, if you go out there in the afternoon or in the summer, it's not as crowded as downtown because there's not the commerce aspect, but just sheer residents out walking. I mean, I don't have anything scientific, but it sure seems like it's a lot busier than other streets. And the only other thing that I would add to that is, I think that the things that are under $500,000 are projects that we could probably tack on and tackle in a more reasonable time frame, because it's not a $10 million ask. And there's not that many of them, and it is progress. So in the grand total of all of them is less than $1 million. So it's just, to me, it's a math. It's just an exercise in what we have left over in the next 3 years in our operational budgets. I think we can do all of those without really trying to. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell?
Pete, just a question about the Manning Oaks Elementary crosswalk. The 125,000, that does not contemplate lighting, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so how much, just a rough estimate, do you think would add on?
It's minimal. So if you look at if you're going to take like the Alpha Loop crossing that we have 2 taller street lights out there. That's probably another $10,000 to $12,000 per light. If you just do pedestrian lights, you're looking around $8,000 to $9,000 per light. Well, the one we have at the mid block we have on Academy Street, we only have 2 that light up that area right there for Alpha Loop. Those 2 work because we have some additional lighting in the park, ambient lighting coming from the park as well as coming from there. Probably just a couple more, like, no more than, I would say no more than 6. 5 would be 4 would try and.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pete.
Councilman Binder?
Yeah, so the Manning Oaks, which I think we're all in agreement, I'd like to see trade winds move from a tier 2 to tier 1 with the understanding that we'd have something more concrete come retreat time of what some of that low hanging fruit could be, because I do think there's projects for the next 3 years on that. And then kind of the council member.
If I could, on that one, I would say I'd be in favor of moving portions of trade winds up. I think it's a big geographic area and we don't have a lot of clarity on what the individual projects are. But I think it's only smart to go ahead and block off some of the higher priorities or block off funding for higher priorities once they're established.
I'm in agreement with that.
Okay.
And then, final one to Councilmember Burnett's point of some of the low dollar amounts that are tier two that I think maybe everybody agrees on. Moving those up just because we can handle that with, current dollars or something. But one I'd like to see is the scramble intersection at Canton Street and Milton Avenue. And move that to a tier one. And that's it.
And just to clarify for staff, so I'm looking at what you would consider the low dollar amounts on tier two being the 50,000 for mid-block at Cogburn Road Park, the mid-block at Mid-Broadwell and Charlotte at 75,000, and the 100,000 for the scramble at Canton and Milton. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Heights?
I see a big difference of opinion on the scramble line. It's either a 1 or a 3. And my concern about that particular intersection is the impact it's going to have on traffic flow. When all 4 lanes come to a complete stop while people are, getting across, and I will use as an example the Hawk light in front of Smoke Jack. You will see people, right at the last second walk off from the town green side and hold up that traffic at the last second when they had no business walking off the curb, but everybody's going to have to wait on them. And once somebody straggles in, with all 4 lanes stopped for a scramble, and you got a school up the street, and you've got people using Canton / Roswell downtown bypass from folks who are coming up from up north through town. I happen to believe, without any data to back it up, that we'll create more problems than we'll solve. I think a traditional crosswalk has worked well there. I'm not aware of any instances, to the extent that any pedestrian such as myself has had to wait for a traffic light or left-hand turns to clear. That seems like a minor inconvenience, but the car traffic people are going to let us know about it real loud and clear when that goes into effect, if that were to be the case. And so that's my concern. So I respect the other point of view, but it's a very unorthodox and unusual way to address pedestrian traffic, something that you might see in Manhattan but would rarely see, I think, in a smaller town such as ours. But
Pete, any thoughts on that?
The last time we studied that intersection, we did not meet the warrants for a scramble. Warrants are important because if we install something that doesn't meet the criteria for something and then there's an accident, I don't say we become liable, but we are looked into to make sure what happens. Traffic has picked up in that area since it was last studied. Do I believe we're going to meet the warrants still? I don't think we will. That doesn't mean we can't pursue it. That doesn't mean that when things get in place, but if this, then that approach does not typically work for pedestrian improvements, dealing with the vehicular assessments. So we got to study that area. We got to see what's going on. You're looking at things at rush hour. You're looking at how things will impact. Will it impact Roswell Street? Most definitely. Will it impact School Drive at Canton Street or at Milton Avenue? Most definitely. It will back up that far. The criteria and the question, Councilman Binder, that you brought up earlier about GDOT. If that crosswalk, that scramble that we put in adversely impacts Main Street, we will lose control potentially over the intersection of State Route 9 and Academy Street. Right now, we work with them adjusting the traffic signal timing. We work with them to keep the traffic flow. There could be instances where GDOT will say, we need to keep State Route 9 moving. And to keep things moving, we may have to adjust the hawk signal at 9 at both locations to line up with corresponding signal movement. Right now, the 9 at Smokejack the hawk works off of immediate gratification. Push the button, light turns on. When we had our complaints from citizens about traffic flow, and GDOT came in and basically said, you must have your signal, that hawk signal, tied to the Academy Street crossing. We then got complaints. Again, it's a circle effect, and we understand that. But we just have to be careful what we put in, especially if we're going to look for funding from outside sources like GDOT, that we don't adversely impact State Route 9. That's my biggest concern.
Councilman Merkel.
I'll just, for the record, I put it as a tier 3 because I couldn't find a tier 4 for that particular project, based on what Pete had told us over a year ago as to when and where these scrambles work. I've seen one in downtown Atlanta near Tech Village. It just seems like you can see for miles in all 4 directions, and 2 of them are 1-lane roads, so it's not a big deal. But as Councilman Hype said, I'm over there 2 or 3 times a week. I've never had a problem getting across the street. I think it's a pedestrian thing, not a traffic thing. And I don't think the pedestrian numbers justify upsetting the traffic at this point. Plus, we're trying to slow things down over there anyway, so let it play out the way it is my opinion. And I just want to put that on for record.
So Pete, do you know off the top of your head what the warrant numbers are?
No, I do not.
Okay. Just because we're not going to be deciding this as a group today anyway, but I'd be curious to see what those numbers are. And once the school opens, whether we think we'll be over that threshold or not, just as we go back to this topic and start discussing it. Councilman Binder.
I do this is a good kickoff to a long-term conversation on it. I will say one of 2 living on the west side of using that side, I do face constant issues, with having kids and holding them for 2 traffic lights to go diagonal, and it has been seen. And the other thing on the warrants, I do respect the fact of trying to let the math, work and warrants and see when it makes sense, but also been on the other end of that too, where on Rucker Road, where it didn't make sense to put traffic barriers on a roundabout, and we see a car going in there. So on this one in particular, I'm okay with saying, I know the numbers are going to catch up to where it is, and I'm willing to put that scramble sidewalk in there and to spearhead hopefully any kind of issue on pedestrian safety. So I do understand y'all's point on there, and I think maybe we see a little bit different on perspective there, and then just want to give my take on matching the warrants of making it work.
With the scramble, you will wait longer to cross. It's the last cycle of the crossing. You will traverse north, south. You will then traverse east, west. Then the cycle comes. So if you get in there at the right time, yes.
With the scramble, I crossed the street once with my kids.
No, I'm not disagreeing from that perspective. Yeah, I don't want you to think you'd be crossing quicker.
It will not be a box sign of like.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I hear you. It produces the one crossing.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Councilman Burnett.
To me, when you look at downtown, just from a residential standpoint, from people on the west side, it's the only place people in Georgia, for whatever reason, don't like. They like the right turn on red. And if you are coming towards the biscuit place from Highway 9 and you turn right, I'm halfway in the intersection. It's more than once that I've literally, and people are not going, 5 miles an hour through a residential area. And I've had breakfast with Matthew Thomas twice. One time he heard me let the person who about hit me hear what I had to say. And I think that, the data science also told us to put a hawk signal from Hardee's to Publix. Well, that was an exercise in futility. And that's across what is now a 6 or 7 lane intersection or road where I don't doubt that there are people that are going to use it, but it's definitely a needs of the few. It was supported at a 6-1 vote, and I turned into Hardee's more than any of the two of y'all put together. And I think that recognizing that it's a part of the signal timing is one thing. I recognize that you're going to have to wait, but I also recognize that those right turn on reds they're dangerous coming here. And when you've got the people coming from Dr. Heinz's office from that direction as a point of reference to Highway 9 and they want to turn left, it's just not culturally conditioned in the South it's not like Washington, D.C., where pedestrians are the first thing that matters and everything else is of lesser consequence by a pretty wide margin. That intersection to me is dangerous.
Okay, and just because we spent a lot of time on this and we've only got about 20 minutes left, I think it's safe to say that there still needs to be some discussion had on this item. I will let you comment, Councilman Hypes. I'm not ignoring you, but my point being that we really need to start identifying if there's other items we want to move around, and it's clear. I'm open. I mean, I've had issues at that intersection. Last week I walked from the deck to the spectacle, went down to the light, took me forever. And all the construction workers were walking down the turn lane anyway. And I was like, well, I might as well jaywalk if they're walking interference for me down the middle of the street. But I do want us to get beyond this one and see if there's any other issues we need to clear up in the next 20 minutes as well. Councilman Hypes?
Yeah, observation and a comment. If we're worried about pedestrian traffic with right turn on red, we would definitely put a scramble at Highway 9 and Old Milton Parkway where I cross every single day, twice a day, because, one time out of 3, somebody's driving right over my heels or right over my toes. But what I would like to see, in terms of a data approach, because of my concerns about traffic, ever since it was announced that they were going to open the high school there, I've always felt like when the high school opens, it's going to be the biggest game changer in downtown Alpharetta with regard to traffic. And I would like to see how many cars are going eastbound in the afternoon when school gets out, and especially at 7:30 in the morning, going westbound. And if it is a tremendous number of cars showing up in a short period of time, 600 students plus faculty, staff? Yeah, no, we're talking about building an intersection. To Pete's point, how far back things get backed up from that intersection towards Highway 9 but we don't know, because we don't know how many folks and what the traffic pattern is going to be. And that's my concern. So that's my comment.
Any other items that council sees they have concerns about the priority rankings or anything like that, or details you'd like to know about any of the other projects? Councilman Hypes.
Regarding the Milton Avenue streetscape, is that project contingent upon any dollars being put in by the hotel or others where we interact with them, or is that just strictly our dollars or no dollars?
This is, I think they're doing I have it set up as our dollars only.
And since that one came up anyway, I'll just kind of give my opinion on that, because I know it's been a topic of discussion on council probably since 2012, 2013, if I remember right. I think it's a nice project and something we'd really like to have. But when it comes to need to haves and want to haves, it breaks down to basically you're spending $4.5 million to $5 million to bury utilities and make that one block very pretty. And so when we have so many other practical transportation and pedestrian safety issues, it's just hard for me to bump it up any further than that without some kind of other income source or some other source of partnerships that's going to help make it feasible. And I know Kathy's real sad to hear that because I know. But that's just kind of where I am. It'd be great to have that. It'd be pretty. But at the same time, it's just hard to justify that expense with so many needs along North Point and other areas of town. Councilman Binder.
Since I put that as a one, I feel the need to say, I hear you. So like once the list comes out, it quickly becomes a one. And you're right, with once we get through all this list, it'll probably be neither here nor there. But it's something that I hope is a priority for this council to push for partnerships as they come up in redevelopment, and that we keep it on the priority list. But I would love to see it, but you're absolutely right.
Thank you. Note for the record, he said I was right. Councilman Heights.
Just because it's in my blood, I'll play a devil's advocate. Not me. The bang for the buck of the postcard view looking down the town green towards City Hall is worth its weight in gold. I mean, it is the picture of Alpharetta. And I just posted that picture. Well, actually looking the other way. Yeah, looking the other way. And I think the city got tremendous bang for its buck out of that view. That's every person that comes to town takes a picture. I think Milton Avenue will be the second place they take a picture. And I think you'll get tremendous bang for your buck. Is it transportation only? We know it's not. It's a cosmetic project. But with that fabulous hotel that's going to be there, and the historic buildings across the street, it'll be the second postcard picture for Alpharetta.
And I don't disagree. The problem is we've got so many needs for infrastructure as far as corridors like North Point that are at risk and some of the other areas. I just disagree with you, and that's fine. We'll continue to have this conversation.
And where we're disagreeing on is what constitutes a need for the city. And if it's a need for moving cars efficiently, then I concede the point. If it's a need for Alpharetta more generically, I don't concede the point.
Yeah, I don't see it as a need for either. It's just a need to redevelop the whole corridor along North Point, where we've got a lot of wish lists over there that are needs to get that area moving in the right direction. And I don't see this changing much as far as that goes. Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To that point, I learned this lesson with you, and I'm looking at hypes if the thing's not on me. And we sat there and looked at an acre of land in the middle of downtown and knew that we would potentially be overpaying for it today and didn't have the revenue source. And it was an opportunity cost that you don't get back. You guys are right, because it's not going to get cheaper. And it is that, and a $40 million bond cost the city $2.25 million. If we can figure out how to get through a significant, I won't say a significant, half of this with that money, we're creative enough to find $5 million. And it may not be something that we do today, but I promise you, if that was the desire of this council, in 5 years, those utilities would be buried. And we can do all of those things. It's just a matter of, not feeding the beast when the operational machine wants to grow. And it's like a budget at home. You tell your money where you want it to go. And I think it's likely that we can sit there and figure it out over the next 4 years at how to bury those utilities, because it is worthwhile. And it's not going to make anybody go faster, but it makes everything worth more. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
I would tend to agree. I think they're valid points that everyone has made. I think once the hotel gets their side done, it's going to be an eyesore. I wished I had voted on this as a number 2 tier, only with the respect that if we can find an alternative source, whether it's the CID or a future downtown development authority or a bond, to make it happen. I think it is important to make it happen. Because I think it is going to be an eyesore once the other side gets done. But given the fact that we're also doing the Alpha Loop, we're also doing North Point Corridor, all those things are important. And somehow, as much as I love and support our community development endeavors, we've got to prioritize which one's most important based on our limited budget right now during the whole COVID crisis. And it's all important. It's just this falls shorter for me right now without alternative funding.
Is there anything else from council? Questions or other project concerns? Councilwoman Richard?
We haven't spent any time talking about the sidewalk repairs and the milling and resurfacing. I know Pete had sent us an email identifying sort of the tiers in regards to the sidewalk repairs and so forth. But I think before we close up, I'd like to have some discussion regarding those two.
I think that's a great point. I know we had the discussion when we were in the individual meetings as a group. So it'd probably be great for Pete if you could go back and review some of those discussions and how you anticipate moving forward with those.
All right. So a couple years ago, council, when we did the firm called Dynatest to rate our roads that we do every 5 years, a component of that was to rate the sidewalks and have inspections for our whole city. Broke that into categories. The number I gave you was basically on that email was fixing the poor and very poor. A little more criteria of poor is a 1 to 2 inch lip. 1 inch is considered a safety hazard in some people's eyes, as well as a percentage of the sidewalks that could be cracked. So basically around 50% of the sidewalks, all panels, all cracked. That made the poor category. Very poor is anything greater than 2 inches or more than 75% of the sidewalk panel has been cracked. We then broke things down within the city into downtown for tier 1, as well as arterials where we see more people walking. Haynesbridge Road, we see a lot of people walking, North Point Parkway, Windward Parkway, et cetera. Tier 2 is non-subdivision roads when you're within a certain quarter of a mile from a school, a government building, or downtown. And the downtown area that we use is what's in our zoning map that has been established. Tier 1 and Tier 2 came into a total of $4 million. Tier 3, 2.4 million. Tier 3, 2.4, excuse me. And Tier 4, $900,000. Tier 4 is those roadways that don't follow in any of the categories, like Upper Hembry, or portions of Hembry Road. We did remove State Route 9 off of our project list, so that was the good news. Things came in on quite expensive. Looking at everything, you're never going to fix everything. We understand that. The $5 million was just initial WAG, given what we needed to have, and just given that we know we had a significant amount of sidewalks to fix. Our approach as we're looking at it is looking at tiers 1 through 4 of the very poor category. Those are our worst safety hazards. Those are our worst issues that need to be addressed. Mansell Road falls in that category between just south of Haynesbridge Road. The trees have just destroyed the sidewalk on both sides there. People use that to get to the Greenway. And we're recommending about, if council sees it as 2.5 million for the sidewalk repairs instead of the initial assessment of 5 million. Take care of the worst areas first to get those back up and going. And that covers multiple areas, not just downtown, not just our collectors, but also heads us inside subdivisions as well. And we have a challenge once we get inside a subdivision, they don't let us leave. And we try to take the priorities and go through it, but I mean, it's certain areas, and it's just, there's a lot of repairs out there. And council will award a lot of dollars towards sidewalk construction too. So we're playing some catch up.
And as I recall, we had some discussions with Director Harris as far as what the ongoing funding requirements would be to do that.
Yeah. So for us, we're going to have to look at phasing things in a little bit. We looked at, Tom and I, is it a bond referendum? That's not for me to decide one way or another. I trust others in that. The $100,000 will not, that we have allocated right now, just doesn't go far enough. roads like Haynesbridge Road or Windward Park where they have to have sidewalk repaired, you're spending more money on our traffic control than anything. So phasing it in would basically be whatever we could come through with the operating budget. We see it as more of a capital operating initiative than we do as a bond. So I mean, a couple $100,000 is a great start. Improving what we can. Our crews can handle the interior subdivisions much better and much more efficiently and at a lower cost.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, and I believe in past discussions, what we were talking about is when we do get together as a group for the retreat in January and to start having discussions about the mid-year budget, it'd be very important to have some plan to bring forward as far as how we do address these and what that's going to require as far as a commitment, service levels and things like that. Any other questions or comments from Councilman Burnett?
Nothing that we have here is free. If we could take 2 minutes and have Director Harris tell us about how he envisions funding our Christmas list, that might be possibilities and what he sees from an economic outlook. I think that would be helpful. Or we can let Sean. I know he's the real talent in the room.
It's the will of that person. Director Harris, you have the floor.
Okay, capital. At the retreat in September, I think we went over some of, how we see capital in our city. And obviously, Pete touched on some of it right there, that we try to establish a pay-as-you-go program for most of our capital. So first and foremost is what is recurring capital? The milling and resurfacing, the stormwater, and fleet replacement, and a bunch of other stuff. That comes to about $9 million a year. So that's the list we try to cover every year through our budget process. In our budget process, you have two ways in which you fund that sometimes. One is I sort of say haphazardly, because you finished the previous year with savings. So you have what's called fund balance. So you can sort of count on that, but you don't know for sure, because that year could have some issues financially, like we did this year with COVID. So that process of fund balance is one way. The other way is to have a line item in your budget that you say, we're committed to funding at least 50% of that number, $4.5 million. And just so that we can remember what we talked about in September, and it reflects what we had to do because of COVID. We were funding $4.5 million, primarily covering milling, resurfacing at $2 million back in those days, $2 million of our money and $500,000 from LMIG, and fleet for $1 million and stormwater for 1.7. So we were up at 4.7 or some number in that range, number funding in a line item, just as critical as a supply line item or a person in our budget. We were funding towards recurring capital. Because of COVID and balancing the budget, you either were going to slash, all of our services, or we were going to go to a concept called let's retreat a little bit. We're not going to be able to fund that number. So that number dropped to $189,000 in this budget we just balanced. And so as we project out next year, we know we need to get that number back up. We'll never be able to maintain milling, resurfacing, and everything at $189,000. So our goal next year is to get that up. We think projected wise, we could be at $1.5 million, let's say, to next year's budget. The operating budget with everything that we're facing, we don't need to get in all the details right now. We think we can maybe get that number on its way. In the interim period, to be able to handle those the milling, resurfacing interimly, we do have sources of monies this year that we've been blessed with, the Avalon sale, the CARES Act money we received back. So we're sitting in a good position to be able to carry out next year's recurring list, so to speak. But we're now shifted funding a good portion of that from one-time monies. You don't have the line item, or you don't have this sustainability, because at 1.5 isn't enough in the long term. But I think we could plan that out over the few years and say, with all future growth, we take committed, to maybe, this is just one concept. This is obviously just one, my concept is to build that 1.5 over time. Because if you tried to build it up right now, back up to $4.5 million, then we need to make more cuts, or we got to have revenue sources just to fund recurring capital. But if we go with a long-term plan that we have cash on hand, we have one, if we can move it to 1.5 to dial back up towards 4.5, but you're a third way there now, and build that back up over time, the next few years with growth, then how do we handle this list? Now, that's the key. Now, how do we handle this list, however it structures out at tier 1, tier 2? Well, let me back up for a second, because I want to make sure, answering Pete's question, on that list, you'll see on the first 2 capital items are milling and resurfacing and the sidewalks. So on the milling and resurfacing, I think with Pete, we think a number of $3 million. So again, milling, resurfacing, 3 million, stormwater 1.7, and $1 million of fleet, you're at 4.7. So if we could have a reasonable goal to bring that 1.5 million line item budget up over the next few years, committed that when we hire somebody, we're always making a decision, are we going to hire and expand the government, or are we going to get this recurring number back? When we get new construction, we need to get that recurring number back. We think we can handle milling resurfacing that way. As he indicated, in our numbers too, there's about 100,000 every year we spend every year on the sidewalks. That's probably not sufficient to get him where he needs to go. We have not spent a lot of time on that sidewalk $5 million number. And I'll do that between now and the retreat. But so that answers why we believe right now they're in the maintenance. I think they're in a maintenance column on that tiered list there. So those 2 items are in the maintenance, but I've not spent as much time on the sidewalk number, and I'll be prepared to do that at the retreat, that we don't think we need to bond it. And then the rest of this list, wherever that shakes out, 40, 50 million, back to your point, we need to identify a funding source, and whether it's T-SPLOS 2, et cetera, or a bond. And then, but if you bond it, you still have to have a revenue source. And your number was about right, probably 45 million. Well, you could actually do about a $55 million deal, we think, at $2.5 million if we wrap it at today's rates. So,
Councilman Binder, and then Councilman Heights.
The only thing I might add is, I think it's good to bring that to the retreat. Maybe throw in stormwater as the third.
Yeah.
Maybe recurring, how much is needed to keep us going, and then, where we can get funding from.
yes. Stormwater, I meant T-SPLOS, all those sources or opportunities. As you may recall, I think, Roswell's moved as a stormwater fee.
Well, I didn't talk about funding
Yeah.
sources yet, just how much
How-
money
how
we
does it-
keep recurring, and
Yeah.
where we at, make sure that you want to get the level of service we need to be at. Similar to
Okay.
what
Yeah, we'll do that. We do that.
Councilman Heights, and then Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Are you getting enough data yet to see how residential property taxes are going to hold up? Because anecdotally, we're seeing residential sales just defying the economy. I mean, they were just, if anything, they've escalated since COVID in terms of prices and days on market and whatnot. That's
Yeah, I mean, in our little world, right down in
well,
downtown.
and I
Yeah.
know of other folks too in Alpharetta. So are you seeing any data one way or the other to say that, we're above, below projections one way or the other, or you're optimistic about where we'll be for the next fiscal year?
Well, I'm optimistic about that. The resale on the resale of properties, obviously, and new construction of properties and what they're coming on at the value. But keep in mind though, I think we've not spent a lot of time to see how much will that give us another couple percent, because what we see is potentially at least next year or maybe a 2-year
when there's a
lag is
sale.
that the commercial
So it
could see
resets.
upwards towards a 9, as I've indicated in the past, if they saw just in pure math, if we saw a 9% drop in the commercial values, whether it's 1 year or 2 years, because sometimes think you're out of it, you're not. It lags between the assessor's office trying to get that sort of recessionary issue that's in the values on the commercial side of us. That 9 million would wipe, I mean, that 9% would wipe out
Yeah, well,
any positive
yeah.
on that side, that's all. And
So-
because of because of the other residential piece that can only go by 3%, the lesser of 3% or CPI, it's sort of.
well, let me phrase it differently. I'm not surprised. You and I are thinking along the same lines about commercial, and it's baked into the equation, and there's nothing surprising about where we think we're right. I am surprised about how strong the residential market in Alpharetta has been. And of course, every new sale, every new construction, it's got a new tax base. It's not subject to the 3% cap. And I didn't know if you had any data where it's surprising you and it's not baked into your equation. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, we don't really have hard data, but I have what you have, the anecdotal or just knowing it's going on. And that makes us feel a little bit better that it will help absorb that commercial side a little better than probably cities around us at least. Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to emphasize, before we go to council retreat, I know Karen and I said in a meeting, I know Jimmy has on some areas of our city that will soon have significant stormwater issues. They already have them, and that's a growing concern. I just want to make sure before retreat, can we try and get some hard numbers and a hard look at those areas that have significant concerns so that before we go to our wish list, that we're addressing those kind of immediate or forthcoming needs in stormwater?
The area, so we have our 20% of our area city inspected every year. We got it divided in quadrants. This is the first year. Next year will be the first year where we're basically going to go back and start at quadrant 1. So we'll know what we've seen improvements on. The meeting in the area that we held earlier with you, sir, was that there is no real true dollar cost I could establish for that area. The amount of properties that potentially have to be bought and what needs to occur long term, I just don't have the ability to give you a dollar amount at that time by January. What I'm working towards is a cost for a firm to design what needs to take place, what the design fee will be. It is rather complicated in the sense of the hydrology, because whatever we would do in that area affects upstream and downstream. So I wish it was just simple, quick solutions that would help it out, but it is an aging infrastructure over there with stormwater. We have done tremendous amount of work over there already of repairs, but what we're looking at doing in that area is quite substantial.
But Pete, would you not agree that whatever that solution is, it's going to have a significant financial impact to our city if we address it properly?
There's different level. Anything we do in that area will have a financial impact. The solution at Bay, there's various solutions that we can do. Majority of the homes in there are in the floodplain. So, but they have not flooded to the level to get reimbursement from FEMA, where FEMA says after you flood so many times, then the properties can be bought out and stuff like that. So it's a very challenging area by far. And it's not the only area in the city.
Right. Thank you.
To follow up on his point, if you don't mind, let's put some thought into that so that when we do have our retreat in January, that we have any of those top priority issues, stormwater related or floodplain related, that aren't already on this capital list. Okay. So that's part of the discussion. Councilwoman Richard?
Well, I was going to suggest that. I think what some of us know and are dealing with on a pretty regular basis is that we've got pretty significant issue that is percolating and not necessarily being addressed with some long-term proactive strategies. And I think that based on our stormwater engineers in public works and in community development, they've got a really good handle on what the challenges are. And I think as a council, we need to really sit down and get an in-depth overview as to what we're currently dealing with and then recommendations about how to address it moving forward. So I think we talked about the agenda for the retreat, and this is one that I was going to recommend putting forward. And I think it's probably a joint effort between Public Works and Community Development.
There's two issues in that area. One is private development being constructed, and then there's the existing infrastructure to be improved.
Correct.
So we don't want to, we'll work and see what we can come up with.
Mhm.
It is.
It's complicated, but I'm
It's
sure
not easy.
we can put it together. I mean, I think if we get the folks in the room and put together an overview and explain exactly what's been transpiring. I know I was unaware to the degree that we've got such deterioration in certain parts of the city. And to me, I think we are, this is something we don't have the luxury of time of putting off. It's something that needs to be addressed given the rapid pace of redevelopment in some of our older areas of town.
Okay. Any other comments before we wrap up? I just want to thank all of you. I know this has been a long, grueling process, and every time we get 3 steps ahead and think we have a vision of what the future was going to be, we got a curveball and we had to go back to this drawing board. So I know it's been a good process, but this is strong. I think this is one of the most thoughtful processes we've been in my 8 years on council. And we've done some pretty good deep dives in the past, but I think we got a really good vision. Now we just got to put our heads together over the next few months and work to see how we can get it implemented. So thank you all. Appreciate it, staff. Appreciate your patience and everyone. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.